We'll start. My name is Rob Daigle. I want to thank everybody for coming here. I'm with the EnviroCollective. We're also part of a national organization called Climate Reality Canada, and we're the local climate hub. Today, we're presenting after the ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada, and we have a full list of speakers. For whoever's in media, what we're going to be doing is doing presentations first. Media, then please flag, put your hand up or whatever, and then we'll take turns rotating for asking questions of the presenters you want to talk to. So at the beginning here, we've got our first speaker is Jim Elliott, who is with the Council of Canadians. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone. My name is Jim Elliott, and today I'm speaking to you from Treaty 4 lands and the homeland of the Métis, and in some circles that's Regina, Saskatchewan. Regina Chapter of Council of Canadians wishes to thank the Supreme Court of Canada for the clarity and confirmation on the constitutionality of the federal government to require action against the existential threat of climate change. We're glad that this court case is over and decided in favor of the federal government being able to require climate action, and we wish that it didn't take 2 years and a huge amount of effort to arrive at this, what we see is an extremely obvious conclusion. When this court case began, we felt rightly that we should be supporting the action of the federal government and believe that the provincial government was not intent to fulfill our collective commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Climate change is real and human activities are its primary cause. We also believe that the impacts of the climate crisis seen today and going forward is a foundational threat to life on this planet, and all of our actions must reduce our emissions and move us away from the precipice where any actions then become adaptive rather than life confirming. Climate change has also had a profound and serious impact on Indigenous peoples, threatening the ability of Indigenous communities in Canada to sustain themselves and to maintain their traditional way of life. Now, 1 degree of change means, as we've been told by our health officials in this pandemic, serious impacts on the planet, our community, and our economy. We must bend the climate curve towards a net zero carbon economy. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And in these at times, our actions, all of our actions must bend towards sustainability, inclusivity, and climate justice. Both Regina and Saskatchewan have been developing emission reduction plans for nearly half of the province, while the provincial government recently attempted to prevent them from creating and implementing good plans. The government of Saskatchewan doesn't want the federal government to tell them what to do on climate, and now they're telling cities that they can't develop their own plans. We do not have time for this provincial government to get in everybody's way. We need to enable people and governments to take effective and equitable climate action, and not to spend more time fighting about who should take the lead. And we all need to take the lead.
Thank you, Jim. Our next speaker is Mark Bigland-Pritchard. Mark is a consultant with Climate Justice Saskatoon. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and welcome everyone. And this is a day for celebration. Now that Mr. Moe's exercise in time wasting is out of the way, the federal government has more capacity to, as Jim said, bend the curve down to net zero emissions. This decision today means not only that carbon pollution pricing can be driven federally, but so can the multiple other complementary measures that are needed to push down our emissions and replace our current fossil dependence with clean, green, renewable energy options and clean, green, renewable jobs. Those measures could include regulations, innovative financing methods, targeted subsidies, and serious government investment in clean energy, efficiency initiatives, public transit, and electric vehicles, and putting an end to government subsidies and favoritism towards the oil industry. As a first step, Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Wilkinson must increase the ambition of their emission reduction targets and toughen up Bill C-12, which is currently going through Parliament. In order to do our fair share as a country, we need to at least double their reduction target for 2030, from 30% reduction to 60% reduction of emissions, together with an action plan capable of getting there. We need a strong intermediate target for 2025 in the bill, and we need all the targets called for in the bill to be a legal obligation, not a mere aspiration. There is no more time for dithering, for excuses, or for cakeism. As for the provincial government, it's long past time when they should be putting a real plan together to bring our horrendously high emissions down in line with these improved national targets. It is entirely possible in this sunny, windy province. And as far as energy efficiency is concerned, there is plenty of low-hanging fruit here. A recent national survey found that 75% of Canadians are seriously worried about the climate crisis, and 81% are highly supportive of shifting to clean energy. It's time to stop listening to the fossil fuel lobbyists and instead listen seriously to the concerns of the people and the advice of the international scientific community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. For media that are just joining us, we have a list of speakers. In the chat box, we've laid out their personal contact information, and if media people want to have extended interviews, we suggest that you contact each presenter directly. Our next presenter is Sydney Chadwick, and Sydney is with Fridays for Future. Sydney.
Yeah, hi. So Fridays for Future is a youth-led climate initiative in the city. And yeah, I'm here on behalf of them. So the carbon pricing decision is a really big moment for climate justice in Canada. It's real actionable change, and we know that it works. In a way, it's a way for Saskatchewan to take responsibility for our emissions, which are the highest per capita in Canada. So instead of fighting this decision and fighting the carbon pricing, it's important that the SaskGov puts those tax dollars towards further protecting the environment and climate initiatives. We need to use this momentum to move forward and to implement further climate action. Instead of fighting against progress and change, Saskatchewan needs to fight for our rights and for climate action.
Thank you, Sydney. I seem to be, can everybody still hear me? Okay. Thank you, Sydney. Our next speaker is Simon Enoch. He's with Saskatchewan Office for Canadian Centre Policy Alternatives. Simon.
Thank you. I just want to make a few brief political comments on the political aspects of the decision. And I don't want to be a skunk at the garden party, but I might have to be. I certainly hope this ends the sort of perpetual conflict around this issue. I don't think it will. The carbon tax debate has proven far too useful to Conservatives as a cudgel to bash the federal Liberals at every moment. And certainly our own Premier and the Premier of Alberta have been more than happy to use that cudgel. So I think they'll be very reluctant to end that conflict. And if that's the case, I think we're going to continue to see conflicts over every time the carbon tax is increased, whether that's yearly or wherever. And you know, it's well documented that the carbon price has to be quite high before it becomes effective. And I fear we're going to be stuck in this sort of perpetual performative dance over what is, you know, really rather a mediocre climate change policy until it gets to very high levels. And that by engaging in this sort of performative combat all the time, we're foregoing more ambitious and aggressive climate change policies that are actually proven to drastically reduce emissions. And in that case, I think we might still be stuck in the status quo, and what's coming is too urgent to remain in the status quo. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. For media again, once we're done, all our speakers, if you can show by wave of hand who wants to ask questions, I will unmute you and then ask whichever presenter you wanted to talk to. Our next presenter is Amy Snyder, and she is representing For Our Kids Saskatchewan.
Hi, everyone. So For Our Kids Saskatchewan thanks the Supreme Court of Canada for doing what is right for the future of generations of Canadians, citizens of the world, as well as for the vast number of species who are also at risk as a result of anthropogenic climate change. For Our Kids is an organization concerned with protecting the world's life support systems so that our kids will have a habitable planet. This is not a minor issue. We do not have time to waste on debating whether or not the situation is real or what should be done about it. We need to be doing absolutely everything in our power to reduce emissions now. We want to see an end to divisive politics, slowing down these efforts. We also want to see all levels of governments making consistent and constant efforts. We don't have until 2050. We don't even have until 2030 to substantially reduce emissions. We need everything to happen now.
Thank you, Amy. Our next presenter is Josh Campbell, and Josh is representing Wascana Solar Co-op.
Hey, hello, folks. Can you hear me? Hello, my name's Josh Campbell. I'm speaking on behalf of Wascana Solar Co-op in Treaty 4 territory. Overall, I would say that we're happy with this decision. What I mean is if there was carbon tax or nothing at all, we would definitely support the decision to ensure that all provinces pay their share. Saskatchewan has plenty of time to come up. We had plenty of time to come up with our own Made in Saskatchewan plan and didn't. Instead, it wasted millions of taxpayer dollars in fighting something they could have used the money to tailor make a plan themselves. However, I think there's reason to be cautiously optimistic. How can we truly say the carbon tax is the main solution if the federal government is still subsidizing fossil fuels to the tune of $3.3 billion per year? The carbon tax doesn't truly act as a market-based solution if government is intervening in this way. In this sense, the carbon tax can become a red herring, distracting us from other policies that government should be implementing. In fact, would not some direct government intervention to de-incentivize fossil fuels and re-incentivize renewables work just as good along with the carbon tax? Could there not be more offered in the way of carrots than the proverbial stick? For example, the restructuring of the net metering program has been devastating to the solar industry in Saskatchewan. Last year, the Leader Post reported that solar installation applications are down just under 700% with the new net billing program. Perhaps the Saskatchewan government could have been pouring money that they did into the court case into making sure that programs continued and jobs stayed here and were created here. Even Alberta has much to teach our government about renewable energy in this way. Alberta has just in January and February of this year alone put into service 156 megawatts of solar. The Alberta government is actively developing 4,457 megawatts of solar to be in service within the next 3 years. In comparison, Saskatchewan has only planned to develop 60 megawatts of solar in total. That is 1% of what Alberta is developing. I ask, why is the region with the best solar resource and the best wind in all of Canada letting this happen? Our government could be offering carrots that maximize the use of these great renewable resources available in our province. Instead, they've been focusing money and resources on fighting the carbon tax. And as a result, it's leaving us to only rely on the stick of the federal government. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Our second last presenter, and well, first of all, I'd like to introduce Larry Kowalchuk. Larry was one of the intervenors and represented a bunch of people at the Supreme Court. Larry, if you just want to say hello and if you have a statement that you'd like to.
Hello, everyone. I don't have a lot to say. I just wanted to sort of make sure that it's clear. I congratulated the Saskatchewan government at the Court of Appeal and welcomed them in sending this question to the courts, which is where a sort of democratic discourse can take place, where we can talk about things instead of fighting, and describe what kind of society we want. And the Supreme Court of Canada, it represents the rule of law. And I want to make sure that people appreciate the significance of a decision from the Supreme Court of Canada with a majority of judges, 6, who are the highest court interpreting the highest laws of this country, and who have said unequivocally, factually, and you can read this in the decision, that we face an existential threat to human life in Canada and the world. And that this is, quote, climate change is real and human activities are its primary cause. That's a quote from paragraph 7 of the decision. And on top of that, the recognition on paragraph 11, as Jim mentioned, Indigenous peoples, the impact on Indigenous peoples to sustain themselves and maintain their traditional ways of life is under threat. So there's no way to understate the significance of these findings of fact after giving every single government, every single politician, every single citizens group and organization in this country an opportunity to present the facts to them and to have them make a decision on that basis. And so there is no debate according to the highest court dealing with the highest laws in our history. And that debate is now not up for debate any longer. So I'm encouraging the government, particularly in Saskatchewan, to sit down. This is the time. There are people on this call, and there are people who they can put you in touch with who are experts or concerned citizens, including youth, who will sit down with you and offer solutions so that we can collectively create and preserve the kind of society which the Supreme Court and the rule of law says we are all entitled to. It's time for that now. So I welcome the Supreme Court decision, and I really hope that the media and the citizens and the politicians respect the rule of law that's been identified here. And I cannot understate, and these questions were asked. It's not like we forced the government of Saskatchewan or Alberta or Ontario or any of the other governments. We didn't force them to do something. They asked for the rule of law to be interpreted and applied. And so I'm hoping, since they've got those questions answered from the people they wanted to ask, that they will then respect those answers and sit down with everybody in this room and outside, and let's do this.
Thank you, Larry. I'd like to introduce now our chair of the EnviroCollective, Larissa Escasko, to have closing presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This last year has been one of worry, uncertainty, and waiting. Today, the waiting on this decision is over. This is one less thing for Canadians to be uncertain about. And now it's time for action. It's time for climate action. It's time to move forward and rebuild the health of our nation, which greatly includes restoring the health of our natural environment and recognizing the need for stewardship of our life-giving resources. The energy transition we are embarking on, not only as a province or country, but also as a global community, is the biggest opportunity we have had to forge a healthier and more just economy, where taking care of each other and other species is part of the system design. Carbon pricing has an important role to play, as it builds on a strategy to move society off our fossil fuels and to rapidly kickstart our economy by harnessing the power of renewables. The vast majority of Canadians are seriously worried about climate change, and the public is highly supportive of shifting to renewable energy. Here in Saskatchewan, where we produce way more than our fair share of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, we also have abundant low carbon energy options. We are well positioned to move forward as climate action leaders instead of the climate action stallers that our provincial government has been throughout this process. It is time for our government to sit down with the groups that are present here today to talk about how we are going to unite to move forward. What we need now is political action, political cooperation, and climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. Again, for media, if you could raise your hand, we can unmute you to ask questions. Our first person in line is Kyle Benning. Kyle, if I'm just going to unmute you and get you rolling.
Thanks, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. My first question is for Mark Bigland-Pritchard. Mark, in your initial comments, you mentioned the...
I'm not going to put them anywhere.
I'm sorry, I think I can hear someone. Mark, you mentioned in your initial comments you hope that the political debate has sort of been solved here, that we're not moving forward anymore. But the Premier released a statement just around 9 o'clock this morning, and it sounds like the government is still pretty upset about this result. And I'll take a quick read here of what his statement says. From the first day this carbon tax was imposed, Saskatchewan people have seen the federal carbon tax for what it is: a blunt, ineffective instrument that kills jobs, threatens competitiveness of our industries, and penalizes essential daily activities. And he says he's going to lay out a plan later this afternoon when it comes to dealing with climate change and the situation in the province. So I was just hoping to get your response to that, considering your comments at the beginning of this press conference.
Mark.
Well, that's unfortunate that he's still fighting this war, as Simon indicated, I guess. I'll look forward to seeing what he has to say this afternoon and see whether it has any more content than what he said so far, because the plan that they've put together so far would maybe, just maybe, depending on the how much industry expands in this province, it would maybe reduce our emissions by about 10% by 2030. We need to be reducing by at least 60%. So we're nowhere near where we need to be at the moment. Let's hope that Mr. Moe actually is prompted by this extremely rational Supreme Court decision to get his act together.
Thank you. Media, any further questions for our panel?
Rob, if there's no one else, I have another one.
Sure, Kyle.
This one's for Simon. Simon, I guess going back to your comments about being a skunk in the garden party here, I'm going to sort of ask you to speak about that a little bit more. On top of that, the NDP also sent out a press release this morning saying it doesn't support an economy-wide carbon pricing plan just because of it potentially hurting some industries more than others, whether it's farmers or the oil sector. And you mentioned there that this discussion might go on a little bit longer. I guess knowing that this decision has come down and that we have statements from both provincial political parties, how long do you think this could go on?
I mean, I think the first thing we have to recognize is that, of course, the Premier is going to try and implement his own plan in place of the federal backstop, because, they're going to do that. They're going to want to direct those revenues towards areas that they want to do, and they want to take ownership of it. Now, does that mean they're going to stop bashing the federal carbon tax? Absolutely not. They're going to continue to do that. And as I sort of said, my concern is that, you know, the bang for the buck for this, for a carbon tax doesn't really start becoming effective until it's quite high. And every time we raise it, we're going to go through this big rigmarole where we have a huge political combat between Western premiers and the federal government. I think it's just going to take, it's going to become so exhausting that we're not going to look for, you know, more robust or more aggressive kinds of regulations. And that ultimately, you know, we're just stuck in this kind of perpetual dance.
Thanks, Simon. Any further questions for panelists? While we're waiting, I just want to give a shout out to our mentors. We're part of the Climate Reality Project, and this morning we have a couple of people that have joined us from Ottawa. We are the local climate hub, and these are our mentors that we work with through EnviroCollective. And I just want to thank them for being a part of this press conference this morning. For media and for everybody else, the contact information has been put in our chat box. The chat box, then you're welcome then to contact each of the presenters individually in case you want to do a private interview or something on the side with cameras. Other than that, I see no more questions. I'm just going to open it up now for the group to, if we want to chat a bit more, since it's not all the time we get this brain trust together in one location. So again, thanks media for joining. If there's still some questions, by all means, pop up. But thank you for joining.